Good evening, everyone. We are happy that you decided to join us tonight. My name is Marta Skrzypek. I work for DataArt company, and I will be happy to be your host tonight. We should have two speakers performing. Unfortunately, Vasily got sick and cannot be with us, so we are keeping fingers crossed for his fast recovery. Fortunately, we have an amazing guest speaker, Anton Boyko. Anton, I would like to say thank you for accepting our invitation and being with us. And before I will pass it on to Anton, just a quick reminder, you may ask your questions in the chat during the speech. I will give a heads up to Anton and he will respond to all of them. So do not be shy, ask as many questions as you wish. Okay, so I guess I'm stopping now. So I give all the words to Anton.
Yep, thanks a lot. So hello everyone again. Let me also welcome you to this IT talk. My name is Anton Boyko. I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP and Microsoft RD as well. I don't work for Microsoft, so all the opinions are my own. The big idea here is that those two titles, there are kind of an awards. So Microsoft recognized me for my expertise and for my contribution into the Azure platform, and also my contribution to the business community in Ukraine and worldwide in general. You can also see my email here, so in case you will have any questions related to this topic or you want to kind of a chat about the IT or the cloud in general, feel free to drop me an email. I usually answer those emails, which may also differ me from the other speakers. On that point, I was trying to make a joke. So let me also talk a bit more about my experience. So I worked in IT for more than 15 years. I worked in a different roles. I used to be a developer. I used to be an IT pro. I used to be what they currently call the DevOps. But currently, for the last few years, I mostly work as a solution architect. And as a solution architect, that's really crucial to understand how we need to implement the solution, not only from the technical standpoint of view, but also in a way that the business itself will benefit from it. So being said that, I want to actually return to the original topic of our conversation today. So we will talk about static websites, and what we will try actually to find out during this presentation. I hope you will enjoy the next 8 hours in a way that I will do. And that was my second joke. We will try to find out the static websites. Is it some old rubbish from the 90s? Or is it the very clever way of doing the modern web? So let's try to find out. And again, I encourage you as well to ask questions, write comments, and all the stuff in our chat. So let's try to keep that interactive. So what I want to actually talk to you about at the beginning. So let's kind of a recap on how the majority of the websites worked in general. So what we usually have in terms of the website. So we have the website content, and for that content, we have a visitor who basically consumes that content, and we have an editor who usually edit that content. And on most of the websites, to make it happen, what we actually need to also have behind the curtains. So we need to have a web server, we need to have an application server, we need to have a database, and we need to have like a file server as well. So I'm talking about all those kind of different CMSs that you may have on the market right now. There are plenty of those. Some of those are free and open source. Some of those are more kind of an enterprise grade. And of course, you need to pay for the support or for the licenses and stuff like that. But in general, even if you're creating a website based on a WordPress or something similar, you will still need to have more or less the same setup. And the idea here is that there are some pros and cons of the CMS in general, and I don't want to kind of say that the CMS is bad. No, that's not entirely my point. My point is, and it will be through the presentation, is that when you start with creating a website, you need to assess basically all the requirements, all the user scenarios, and then decide, do I want to use the CMS in the first place, or maybe there are some other solutions that will be more beneficial for this project. So let's start with the plain HTML website. And for the plain HTML website, the only one question that I want to ask is still a thing in 2020. And we're almost in 2021 right now. And the answer may actually surprise you because in general, yeah, it's still a thing. And let me give you an example. So let's say that you are creating something like a landing page for your product or something like that. Or maybe you are, and that was actually really popular, probably like 5 or 10 years ago, something like that, especially here in Eastern Europe. Maybe you are a front-end developer. So as a front-end developer, you want to have your CV, but you want to have your CV in this nice and cool, let's say, front-end developer style. So that is why you create a simple website. You put some CSS, some JavaScript, a lot of fancy animation and stuff like that. So technically, that will be the website, but you were able to fully implement that without any CMSs. And in addition to that, it serves the basically the same point as you were trying to achieve with this website. So you wanted to kind of talk to the world about yourself. You want to share what your experience are, and also you want to basically show to the entire world what you can actually do in practice. So that will be the perfect scenario. And actually, if we do have someone from the attendees right now who are playing the role of front-end developer, I will actually encourage you to do that because I've seen some of the websites that were created in that way, some plain HTML websites, and they were awesome. I mean, like, I just love them. And the other scenario, as I was saying, was that if you're kind of a small business, if you need to create something really, really fast, and then what is also important is that if you don't want to change the content of that one single page frequently, then why not to use the plain HTML website? But usually, what we are concerned about when we're talking about the website, there are a lot of things, but usually most of the people concerned about the performance. And as you may understand, if you're adding the CMS, you're actually adding a lot of things. So that is why the performance potentially will be not such great as you may have with the plain HTML website. In terms of the performance, the usual metric that we use basically as an engineers, and also this metric is used by the Google, for example, to determine the quality and the ranking of your website, it's called time to first byte. So time to first byte basically show how long it will take to start downloading the first byte of your website. What actually needs to be done to start downloading your website in the first place? So the web server itself needs to receive an HTTP request. It needs to map this request to the specific handler. So for example, if you're creating your site with PHP, the web server needs to map that request to the PHP handler. If you're creating with .NET or Java or whatever other technology it may be, the web server still needs to map basically that request to the particular handler. And then the handler itself needs to be executed, and then we can start sending the response back to the user. So I also want to dive a bit more into the details of what is happening actually when we are executing this handler, because here it's all about the code of our application. So what is really happening on that level? Again, as an example, you need to map a request to the web page. So first you map that request to the handler. So you said, okay, those kind of a requests, they should be handled with the, I don't know, ASP.NET application or like PHP application or whatever. But now when the request actually came to the ASP.NET or PHP or whatever other application is, you need to map that request to the particular web page. So that's the first part. Then for that page, potentially you need to find a layout. You need to also find some partials if you are using that, like different components that will basically end up in your web page at the end. And in addition to that, we also need to remember that we need to retrieve some data from the database. So the overall experience, the overall, let's say, performance of executing this handler will also be affected by the performance of the database. And then you need to render that page and create basically a single HTML file. So as you can see, there are a lot of things happening here. And what we need to do if we want to address kind of a good performance of our website, we need to improve on that. And there are some usual techniques how you can to improve on that and how you can reduce the time to first byte. So first of all, you can cache some data that you get from the database. Also, you can cache some data on a component. So for example, let's say if you're rendering the main menu of your website or like the header of your website, and if that header is by some kind of reason, for example, affected by some data that you get from the database, then you can cache not only the data, but you can cache the rendering of that particular component, that part piece of the page. Or you can cache on the web server level the entire HTML output. Or you can use the solutions like the CDN and cache the data on the edge. The difference is that the more you will go to the top of this list, the closer you will be to the data source. And the more you will go to the bottom, the closer you will be to the end user. So why I actually sharing that with you? Because the idea is that if you're closer to the data source, you will be able to update your data quite frequently. But the further away you are from the data source, that let's say the more it will take, or like maybe like the bigger delay you will have in updating your data. But on the other hand, the further away you are from the data source, the closer you are to the end user. So the best the best scenario is that if you can even cache the whole website on end user device, in that case you will have the best level performance. But on the other hand, again, if you're caching the data on the end user device, for example, the question remains how you will update that data. To answer that, there are no kind of clear, let's say, way of answering that, but I just kind of want to show you the direction, and the direction is to trying to keep the balance and trying to keep the balance between the exact scenarios of how the visitors works with your website, and the visitors basically they are doing the downloads for your website, and how editors works with the website in a way that how they're doing the uploads. And I want to basically stay on this slide for a moment, and I want to basically explain to you this kind of a scenario. So let's say that I have a website. Let's say that, well, let's start with a simple example. Yep. So let's say that I am, I don't know, maybe a consultant, or just maybe, I don't know, like an expert in any area. And I want to create my personal branded website, which will consist maybe of like 5 pages. So I will have like a home page. I will have a page with my context. Maybe I will have also a few pages where I will describe what was the most recent project that I was implementing and stuff like that. In that case, in terms of the scenario, what is important is that as an editor of that website, I will probably not update that content quite frequently. But as a visitor, for example, I may run a marketing campaign in social medias like on a Facebook or like in Google or something like that to pay for the advertisement and stuff like that. So potentially I will have like 99% or even more of the download request and only 1% of the upload request. And also because as I was saying, I will probably not update that content quite frequently. That means that, let's get back to this slide for a moment, that I can cache that content as close to the end user as possible. Let's say that I will use the CDN for that. And if you're familiar with the CDN solutions, then you know that the CDN works in a way that you basically set the expiration timeout for all the content that you put into that CDN. So for example, I can create my site as an HTML file with some JavaScript, CSS, and stuff like that. And then I can upload it to the CDN and say that, for example, the expiration policy will be like 1 day or 1 week or 1 month. It will basically mean that if I want to update that content, I can update it, but then on the CDN itself, the content will be updated again according to the policy in either 1 day as soon as the old content will expire, or 1 week or 1 month. But let's talk about a bit more complicated scenario. Let's say that I'm a small business. And as a small business, of course, I have a website, and some of the parts of my website may still be, kind of a static, like an homepage, maybe, I don't know, like a page with the context and stuff like that. But some of those may be relatively dynamic. So let's say that I'm a small business, and let's say that I'm selling something like a board games, for example. Why not? That's actually one of my hobbies. You can probably see a few boxes of my favorite board games right behind me currently on your screen. So the idea is, if I want to implement a simple e-commerce solution, and I want to sell a board games, and my target audience, it's, for example, my country only, and I will do the delivery over, I don't know, like a regular post mail service. I mean, like a regular post service. I can basically still utilize some static things. But the key point here is that as a small business, I will probably not have a huge team of editors. So the idea is that as an editor, let's say I'm a kind of a one person who can edit that website. Of course, it may seem like I need to have a CMS to manage the whole website, but it's actually not. So let me give you one of the examples. So first of all, what I will use as a data source, basically for my list of the board games that I will display on a website. And usually, what most of the engineers probably will say that, yeah, let's try to use like a relational database for that. And that's fine. That's fine. But again, that's fine if you have like a big team of editors. But if I am a one person only, then with the same basically amount of success, I can use something like an Excel spreadsheet. Why not? So this is a single file, and as an editor, I always have a single version of that file, and I can always say what is the most recent version of that file. So I can basically say that I don't need to have like a database as my data source. I will be fine with that Excel file. And then what I can do, I can, for example, create a script which will go through that Excel file. And for each and every row it will find in that file, basically each row will contain the definition of one single board game. For each and every row, it will pre-render based on, I don't know, whatever rules, it will pre-render the HTML page, which will describe that particular game. So it means that as a small e-commerce solution, I can still pre-render all the different pages of my website upfront, and then upload them to the CDN and reach the best possible performance. And also, I don't need to set up the whole CMS solution. And for that, the solution will be the static website generators. So if you're not familiar with those, let me kind of go briefly through the idea of the static website generators. So what you have as a part of them, let's say, input sources for your website, you have the layouts, the templates, and the components. Those are basically related to the kind of a design and the final layout and the overall experience, how the user will navigate through your website. Then you have some static assets, maybe some images and stuff like that. Then you have the data files. And by data files, I mean, like in my previous example, like the Excel file that you will use, for example, to generate that list of all the board games that you're about to sell. And also because you may have some kind of a custom pages, like a home page or like about page or whatever, or maybe like the delivery policy page. So you will also have some extra set of files which will describe basically the pages on your website. What is important is that that part is related to the kind of a design stuff. And as you can see, the static assets may be partially related to the design, but in addition to that, they may partially relate to the content. So the idea is that, for example, I put all my images in a single folder, but some of those may be, for example, like banners or like a logo of my company, which will always show in a top left corner of my website, but the other one may be more related to the content, like the, for example, images of those board games themselves. So then, as soon as you have all of those, you use a static site generator, and there are a lot of different solutions, and then you basically get a website content. So let me just show you how it works in real life. Let me just show you an example of a simple static site generator. So what I will do, I will close the presentation and I will start showing some code. Let me just, wait a sec, let me just find the exact window that I wanted to share with you guys. So let's start with this one. So this is Visual Studio Code. I hope that the Zoom level is okay for all the attendees. So what I have here in terms of the of my website. So I have an src folder, and within that folder, I basically have all those components that I was talking about on my previous slide. So I have some static assets. What I have here, I have an icon of my site. I have some CSS. I have some libraries from third-party vendors like Bootstrap, jQuery, so on and so forth. Then I have the layout, I have my default layout, and I have some partials like footer and header that I will incorporate in each and every page of my website. Within the data folder, I have, for example, the authors of that website in YAML format, and then I have some other data files here as well. Okay. And then I have pages. And here for pages, I have like the home page of my website. I have the folder structure page of my website. And if we will take a closer look at this page, you will be able to actually see that here we are talking about the regular markdown page with some extra metadata on top. But then this is the markdown. And the idea why I actually choose the markdown is that because in general, Markdown is super simple to master. So, oh yeah, actually one more important point related to this one, this static website generator that I will show you today in my first demo, because then I will show you the other tools as well. This static website generator, it was actually created by me, and I used the .NET Core to implement that. I started to implementing that when it was like a .NET Core version 2.1 or whatever. So it's cross-platform. It works like a command line tool, and it's on a GitHub. So if you want to check how to implement that, I can give the link. You can always check it. But the idea is that while I was implementing that engine, I actually understand a lot of different things about how static website generators work in the first place. So, okay, so we had all that data. What we need to do now, let's, first of all, let's delete this folder. Okay, so we need to actually run that render command. And in my case, I need to run this command. So I will do that. So it will basically go through all of my pages. It will check what dependencies they have and stuff like that. And as you can see, the site is ready. So what we can do now, I can switch. I need to actually open a new version of a terminal. I can switch to www folder. And here in my www folder, as you can see what I have basically the HTML version of that website. And what I can do now, I can run some simple HTTP server here on my machine, and then let me open a browser and let me pull browser into this window. And what I will do here, localhost 8080. Okay, this is the website. So as you can see, there are some stylings here, and I can do and check the folder structure. I can navigate through that website. I can check how the data layer works. I can check, for example, how the remote data sources works and stuff like that. I can navigate back through those links. I can check how to create my first website and stuff like that. So the idea is that for this simple website, it works perfectly. It works perfectly because there are kind of no interactions with the end users. So this is kind of a more or less one-way interactions with the users, and it works perfectly. And if you're actually asking yourself, okay, so this crazy guy basically creates this tool, but do we have any other companies who are basically using the same approach as well? And my answer will be yes. Let me just show you an example. So one of the companies, and I do believe that you are familiar with that company, one of the companies that are also using that approach, that will be Microsoft. So the Microsoft for the website with all the documentations, basically for docs.microsoft.com, they are using the same approach of static website generators. Of course, a much more advanced approach, but in general, that's the same idea. So first, what they are using GitHub as a data source. So if you will go to GitHub, to this repo, you will be able to navigate through all the pages. And as you can see, currently I'm on a page which is describing the best practices for Azure App Service. So what I have here, I have a markdown, and also I have some metadata on top, which then will be picked up by the static website generator. But nonetheless, I have all the content here. For example, it starts with the collocation, then when up, consume more memory and stuff like that. And if I will go to the actual website, docs.microsoft.com, as you can see, that's the same content here. That's the collocation, when app consume more memory and stuff like that. And the idea is that especially for those websites which are, kind of maybe your personal blogs or like company blogs or like the website with some documentations and stuff like that, that's one of the best ways how you can implement those in the first place. Because again, you don't need to have any interaction with the users. So they just came here, read the article, and that's it. And those articles, they are not changing so frequently. So it means that you can pre-render that and you can cache the HTML page itself. And it will be much more faster rather than having a full-blown CMS solution behind it and render each page over and over again for the same user. So I do believe that on that point, you at least started to consider those static website generators as something that you probably will check in the future and hopefully right after this presentation. So let's recap a bit on the benefits of a static website generators. So the first benefit will be it's easier to master than the CMS. And that's another good point, because if you want to have, let's say, a small side business, so you may have some free time on the weekends, or I don't know, and you're willing to work like 4 or maybe 6 hours on your weekends on some side projects, and I don't know, like a local small shop, maybe like a local coffee shop or something like that. The owner approaches you and asks you to help with the website, then why not to implement that with a static website generator? And one of the benefits for you as an engineer will be that it's much easier to master than the CMS in terms of how to create the content, how to create the layout, and all those stuff. Then no application and database servers are needed. And saying that, again, it will mean the cheaper hosting. Because now what we have and what we need to host will be the HTML pages only. That's it. So as I was saying, you can literally host that website on the CDN itself. And it will be much more cheaper than paying for the database, for the application server. And then if you will have like a big load or something like that, you will probably need to pay extra for a kind of a bigger pricing tier and stuff like that. Also, it will be more secure hosting. And why? Because you do not have any application there. So you are not exposing your application to the public as well. You have only the HTML pages. So I mean, like, if even if someone will go there and I don't know, let's say replace some of the pages with some inappropriate content for that website, for you to fix that will be basically just to run the tool again, upload the first version of the content, replace everything that used to be there before, and that's it. But in general, the idea is that because you're not exposing your application publicly, you don't host your application publicly, it means that you don't need to concern for the security of that application. Of course, you need to concern about the security in general, but in this particular case, that will be much more easier for you to maintain and implement. And another thing is that you will have the faster HTTP response generation. And again, why is that? Because as I was showing you basically that chart before, the web server itself, it will receive the request, then it will need to map that request to the handler, then handler needs to be executed, and then we need to return the response. So in current case, we will also have the handler, but what the handler will do, the handler will go to the file system, pick up the file, and return it to the user. So that's one of the fastest operation in general that you can actually ask from your web server. The one operation probably that will be even more faster is to use not the file system, but the memory, the RAM, basically, of your web server to do the same. But for now, let's just stick to the file system because the RAM is usually not persistent. Then you have no hosting vendor lock. And this is also important because usually when you host some like CMS or any other application in general somewhere, you have those requirements to the vendor that, okay, for example, I create that in a PHP, or I create that in Java, or Node.js, or .NET, or whatever. It means that now I'm limited in terms of vendors only to those who can offer me to host the PHP application with exact version of the PHP and so on and so forth, or with an exact version of the .NET and stuff like that. In this case, you can choose literally any hosting vendor, It can be either a cloud vendor or maybe kind of a other smaller company which operates only in your region, but still the idea is that you have no vendor lock at all in terms of hosting. But then the question is like, what if we need to still add some dynamics? So let's say again that I'm basically that consultant or like an expert in some area. So I created my website with my profile, and then I have a kind of a, let's say, request for a callback form on that website. So you basically check my profile, you want to engage with me, so you put your number. Yep, this is kind of one text box. You put your phone number and you just click kind of a please call me back. So in that case, you need to add some dynamic, but in that case, the dynamic to that website may be added with the client-side JavaScript and also probably some magic on a server side, but we'll check on that in a bit more details later. For now, what I want to show you guys, I want to show you basically how easy it is to host that website in the first place, especially when we're talking about hosting that in the cloud. And of course, because I was saying that I work a lot with the Microsoft, so that is why all the examples that I will show to you today about the cloud will be the examples about Microsoft Cloud. So what we are about to do now. So we will go to the Azure portal, and I will create a new resource group here. Probably I should zoom it out a bit. Okay, so let it called IT Talk 2020, and let's create it in West Europe just because I like it more. So as soon as I created my resource group, that's more kind of a logical container for my application. What I need to do now, I need to basically create a hosting solution for that static website. And for that, I will use storage, Azure storage. Yep, so I'm about to create a storage account. I need to fill some properties here as well. So let's also name the storage account IT Talk 2020. And because I'm cheap, I will use the cheapest pricing tier, read locally redundant storage. So review and create, I can skip all those other things. I can leave them on a default values and create. It usually will take 1 minute. So on that, while we're waiting for that 1 minute for the storage account to be created, let me actually check on, do we have any questions in a chat that I can answer while we're waiting or not?
So far, no. So we can move on.
Okay, so we don't have any questions. That's fine. So then let me just kind of briefly describe what I will. Awesome. It's created. So we created that storage account. As you were seeing, it took even less than a minute. So what we need to do now, I basically open that storage account, and then on the left side, I scroll a bit till I found the static website tab. I will go there and I will enable the static website. Now I need to basically set what will be my default document and what will be my error document. So for the default, let's use index.html. And for the error, let's use error.html. I will save it. And that's basically it. So what I can do now, let me just open a Storage Explorer application. And the reason why I want to open that is that I want to use the Azure Storage Explorer to basically upload all my files of that static generated website to that new storage account. As you can see, I have a hell of a lot of different subscriptions. I was using this one, Microsoft Azure sponsorship. And let me find that IT Talk 2020 account. Awesome. Let's expand it. Let's go to the blob containers. And what we can see here, we can see a container with the predefined name $web. So what we need to do now, let me just, I do have a lot of things opened at the same time. But what I need to do, I need to go here. I need to open this folder in a Finder, basically my www folder. So this is the folder with that content. Oh, sorry. And what I need to do now, I just need to select all those files and drag and drop them here. That's it. So they will be uploaded to that container. And as you can see, that also works quite fast. So what I can do now, I can go back to my Azure portal, and you can see this primary endpoint, basically the URL for my website. I can copy it, and let's keep the fingers crossed that when I will open it right now, I will basically see my website. And as you can see, it's there, which is awesome. So I can go to the reference. Again, I can go to the data layer, remove data sources, stuff like that. So as you can see here, the URLs are basically pointing to those HTML files that I was showing you before. And the reason actually why I like that so much, because I'm hosting this website in Azure with a hell of a lot of things which were done by the Microsoft for the reliability, for the availability of that solution and stuff like that. In other clouds, like in Amazon, for example, in AWS, you do have the same solution as well. You should use the Amazon S3 solution, basically the same storage solution implementation like I show you here, and you will be able to host your websites in the same way. I do believe that for GCP, for the Google Cloud, you should have more or less the same, but unfortunately, I never implemented that in a GCP. So I cannot kind of, like commit that you will have the same in a GCP, but probably you will be able to find something. Anyway, what I wanted to show you as well is that why I like those static websites by a lot, because it handles the security, the availability, and the other things for me. And let me just switch to one of my subscriptions, which I use for the production website hosting for a few clients of mine. So this is one of the websites, and here let's take kind of a short, maybe 10 seconds pause. So what I will do next, I will open a tab which will show to me basically what it costs to host that website in Azure with all the availability, security, and la la la. And I want you to take that 10 seconds and try to guess what that number will be to host one static website in Azure. Let me open the cost analytics. It will take like more or less the same 10 seconds. Okay, and the right answer is, we're still waiting. The right answer is less than $1. So guys, I mean, like, just think about that. So you can create a static website and then you can host it in those huge vendors like Azure, like AWS, and other vendors in the cloud for less than $1 per month. I'm not actually sure of which exact countries we are covering right now with this live streaming, but at least I can say that for sure for Ukraine. So for Ukraine, if you will go to the McDonald's to get one cup of coffee, they will charge you more than $1. So I mean, like, hosting this website in a cloud is cheaper than having a coffee in a McDonald's. So just imagine how awesome it is. Okay, so on that point, let's get back to the presentation because I want to talk a bit about a few other things. So we were having that conversation about how to add some extra dynamics. And I mean, like on the client side, of course, you can use the client-side JavaScript to add some dynamics, but I was basically explaining you that scenario of call callback form. So let's say that you want to implement something like that. And let's say that you want to basically grab the data and then what? For example, you want to send that to yourself in an email. And you will receive an email that like the guy with this phone number wants you to call him back. So what do you need for that? Beside the client-side JavaScript itself, you also need to have some server-side API. And for server-side API, the trick is that, of course, again, if you're working with like a Node.js, for example, you may be familiar with an Express framework. If you're working with the ASP.NET, you're definitely, like if you're working with .NET, you're definitely familiar with an ASP.NET solution and stuff like that. But if you want to host them, you will need to pay by a lot. And the reason for that, and by a lot, I mean like much more than $1. And the reason for that is if you want to host that solution, it means that you need to have some kind of a CPU reserved for you, some RAM and stuff like that. But there is an alternative option, and the approach in general called serverless or serverless functions. And there are kind of different implementations. For example, in Azure, they called Azure functions. In AWS, they called Lambdas. In GCP, they called Google functions. So the idea is that they may look like an API, but it's not like they are kind of a new ways of doing the API. No, I mean like they may look like an API, but they're actually not. The idea is that for those serverless solutions, especially in terms of billing, you will usually pay on a per execution based model. So for example, in one hand, let's say the old-fashioned way of bill you will look like we will charge you like $10 per month for one CPU. And you understand that even if you want to downscale, you cannot downscale below one CPU, of course, because you need to have at least one CPU for your basically 18 infrastructure to work in general. But with the serverless functions, the billing model will work in a way that, for example, we will charge you 1 cent for every 100 requests or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So in one hand, if you will try to put a huge constant load on the functions, then it may become much more expensive than hosting your API on the, let's say, CPU-based billing plan. But the idea is that if you have a small solution, and again, even for the callback form, so if you will have like 100 requests per month, or even like 1,000 requests per month for that callback form, you will pay what, like extra 10 cents? There are no clouds or like no decent hosting options that you can actually get for such an awesome price. So let's talk in a bit more details of what are the serverless functions in the first place. So because it's a function, you have like a piece of code, and that's literally a function. So if we're talking again about Node.js, for example, then you create a file, and within that file, you basically export from that file as a module, you export one single function. If we're talking about the .NET, then again, you basically create your class in a .NET, and then you're marked with an attribute, one of the methods, to be that function. So technically, you are creating, let's say, a function or a method of the class in the same way as you used to create it before, and now you just need to wrap it in some wrapper that will actually allow you to host that particular code as a function on this or that platform. Okay, so you created the code, you know what needs to be executed, and you explain that to the platform. Now, as you may understand, you also need to explain when it needs to be executed. And you are doing that by also implementing a trigger. You always need to implement a trigger, and it can be only one trigger. What can be an example of that trigger? That can be, if you need to do something on a scheduled basis, that can be, for example, a timer. That's a good trigger. Another example will be, for example, the HTTP request itself. In that case, you will have a URL, and by sending a request to that URL, and that request, it may be like get, post, put, whatever, basically any HTTP request that you can send to that URL with any payload that you may want to send to that URL, you send it, and it will trigger your function. In addition to that, what you may have, in addition to the triggers, you may also have some extra input bindings. And one of the examples that we can use here is that, I don't know, let's say you have a URL, and as a part of that URL, you have something like, I don't know, maybe an item ID or something like that. So you want to order like one particular item, or you want to order like this particular service, and the URL that you construct, it basically has that as a part of like a pass. So what you can say, that you can say, I want to take that particular segment, and then as a part of my input bindings, I want to map that to the, I don't know, like external source. And what it may be like a database, for example. And the reason for that is that how I was using that, and I will show it to you in a code in a few minutes. I was actually creating, let's say, a few different forms on a website. Like one of those may be like the callback form, the other may be like a leave feedback form and stuff like that. But all of those forms, the idea in general works in a way that I will just grab the data, create an email, and then send that email to myself. But for different forms, I may want to use a different templates that yeah, basically kind of the layout templates for that email. So I may have, for example, as a part of like one of the segments in my pass that will actually correlate, for example, with the file in my file storage. And then it allows me, together with the trigger, to automatically pull the content of that file to my function. And it means that now my function can be, like can use this transparent bindings capabilities, so I don't need myself to go connect to exact API and download that exact version of the file from that API. No, it will be totally transparent, and then in case I need to replace that, it will be potentially much easier for me to replace it. In addition to that, your code may have some output bindings, and if we're talking about the HTTP request, then you realize that one of the mandatory bindings for an output that you want to have here will be the HTTP response. That is obvious. In addition to that, you may also have some logs. And as I was saying, the benefits of that is that you have per HTTP request bidden module. So let's actually see how it works in a real life. What I want to show you here, guys, I also had a few sites opened in my other window. Let me just find them here. Okay, awesome. Let me just move them to this screen and again, maybe zoom a bit. So this is the first website that I wanted to show to you. So this is the website dedicated to those kind of candies. So kind of a nice looking, a lot of rich graphic website. What we will do now, we will go to the menu and we will go to the contacts page. And what we will do here, we will scroll down and we will find this feedback form. So let's check how this feedback form is actually implemented. So what I will do, I will basically open my debuggers tool, and first I will go to the sources. So here is my website, and I will go to assets, and I will go to GS, and as you can see what I have here, I have some configs, I have some other things like a knockout, like a modernizer and stuff like that, and I have a contact form JavaScript file. and that file is actually opened here. So the code that I need to have on the client side to implement that feedback form is based on a knockout engine. And I will say you even more that I'm also, as you can see here on line 24, for example, I'm also using the jQuery. So in one hand, the knockout and the jQuery, they were brilliant technologies like 7 or 8 years ago. So they may be, like quite old. And of course, currently you have a much fancier front-end frameworks. But the biggest benefit of both jQuery and Knockout for this project was that they are super simple. So when you need to create just this one feedback form with like what, 4 text boxes as an input field and 1 button, you don't need to put, like the whole React or Angular or Vue or whatever to this website. You will be more than fine with the super simple solution. And even if you will call that kind of an old legacy code, again, that's fine to do that job, because let's check how many lines of code I have to make this contact form working. It's less than 100 lines of code to make this form working. So for that will be super easy to support, and basically the person who will support that, it will not suffer from all that, like legacy things that we usually may have in a bigger projects. What I wanted to do right now, I wanted to also, I wanted to find, this instance of my Visual Studio Code. And on this one, I just wanted to show to you how I implemented the backend for the same form. Let me for a moment open the file tab. So what I have here, this is the Node.js project, and I can use Node.js, I can use ASP.NET, I can use PHP, Python, and Java, and PowerShell, and probably even Bash, but I'm not sure about that. I can use all those things to implement my Azure functions. So I mean, like, I can really use the tool that I know and love more than the others. And for this particular thing, I decided that I want to use the JavaScript, the Node.js in particular. And the reason for that is that a person who will need to maintain this solution afterwards, he will need to know the client-side JavaScript, so it will be potentially easier for him also to master the backend side JavaScript, or vice versa. Anyway, what I have here, I have like 3 folders which are dedicated to my functions: process call, send email, and submit call. And also I have a folder shared with some shared call. So let's start with the submit call. So what I have here, I have basically 2 mandatory files. And to be honest, okay, so that's not like a JavaScript, that's a TypeScript, but nonetheless. So I have an index TypeScript file with my code, and I also have this function JSON file, which basically describes the bindings, as you can see. So I'm describing in a declarative format how it will work. And as you can see, I defined here a root, and also I said that this function will be triggered by the post methods only. So let's check what I have in a code. So in a code, I'm creating my Azure function here. I'm creating the HTTP trigger function, and then, as I was saying, I'm just exporting that from that file, and that's it. So as you can see, I have less than 30 lines of code on this one. What I'm doing here, so this file is this function, this is basically my API, and the idea is that I want to receive the data from that form. I want to receive that in a JSON format, and I can even show you what that JSON format will look like here. So it will be something like that. The client will need to post on this API, and that will be the payload of my request. So I will have a JSON object with one property called client, and within client, I will have name, email, subject, and message. Basically all those fields that I have in my feedback form. Okay, so on a submit call, what I'm doing, I'm basically receiving the data from the client, and then I'm creating a new, a new object using the class email process request, and I'm actually filling that object with some properties. So first of all, I decided to use the current date time as an ID. That's definitely not the best solution in huge scale applications, but based on that website and based on the amount of traffic that usually goes to that website, that's more than fine to use an ID here in this way. And then in email data, I basically put everything that I have in my request body. And then I also say that the email template that I will use will be the call new template. So the idea here is that if I want to use like a different email templates for like a feedback form, like a callback form and stuff like that, I can do that with basically choosing the proper email template here. And then I also have a configuration database, and I will not show you the configuration database, but the idea is that within the configuration database, I have the list of the emails, or basically the list of the recipients who will need to receive that email. So in case I want to send that to myself, but with a few different addresses, or to other users as well, I can do that. And in addition to that, I am actually grabbing the client email so I can send that copy of that email to the client itself. So he submits some feedback and I will send him over email basically the content of that feedback, and that's it. So the next function called process call, and in that function I'm basically receiving over the message queue the output of the submit call. And what I'm doing here in the process call, I'm actually rendering the HTML templates themselves. The reason why I'm doing that is that, again, that's kind of an example how you can scale. As soon as you grabbed all the data from the request, you basically send that using the queue to another agent, and you basically return the response to the client. So the idea is that in that way, I'm basically returning the response to the client as fast as possible. And now this guy is, as I was saying, it basically renders that HTML. It creates actually two versions of that email in HTML and the plain text. And then it basically saves them to the file storage. Uh, it saves them to the file storage, and then it uses the bindings again to send a message to the third party. And this third party, this is again my other function, and this function is responsible for sending in emails. So now I'm receiving the same email, I mean like the same text of that email, but now I may need to send it to like 5 different addresses. So again, it means that I will be able to scale on this one, and I will send those emails to those 5 different addresses. So that's actually how it works in real life. And I do believe that those functions, they are quite easy to master, especially if you know the exact language. Because in general, what I'm doing here, let's take this function as an example. So what I'm doing here, for example, I'm just grabbing some data from the file system in terms of I'm grabbing basically the templates, and then I'm matching that template to the data, and I'm using the handlebars, basically the library, the Mustache template engine. I use that to create from my template the HTML and the plain text version of the same messages. And yeah, I mean, like that's to my understanding is quite easy to master and much easier to master than um, the full-blown CMS. But that's not it. That's not it. Some of the guys, they went even further. And I want to show you this project. So some guys went even further, and the idea is that in general, when we are talking about static website generation, it will mean that all the website will need to be static. But this framework in particular, and as you can see basically from the name, this is the Next.js framework. One of the benefits is that they are actually went beyond the regular static website generation, and they were saying that first of all, you will be able to choose. You will be able to choose basically, do you want this particular web page on your site to be statically generated? Or do you want that page on your website to be dynamically generated? So the idea is that they are kind of combine the best of two worlds. They are kind of combined the static generation, which brings you the cheap hosting and super fast performance, with the dynamic, which gives you kind of a maximum flexibility, and they put it into the single solution. And they said that you can choose for each and every page within that solution. Do you want it to be more static, more dynamic, and stuff like that, which is really awesome. So I encourage you, especially if you're a JavaScript developer, I encourage you to check the Next.js framework as well. So the difference is that here, the Next.js, that's the framework. So that's not the static site generator. So it means that we need to do a lot of coding here. It has both pros and cons because, as I was saying before, especially in my static site generator, you don't need to do any coding at all to create a small website if you don't want to have any interaction with an end user. But with this framework, you will need to code each and every page. So basically, the learning curve for this framework will be not so steep. But nonetheless, what we can check here, we can check the pages. And here, as you can see, each and every page is described as a separate JavaScript file. So we can go, for example, and check how the index page was implemented. And here, if you're familiar with the React, then you will see more or less a regular React application here. The difference is that, again, you can control with the configuration. Do you want it to be static or do you want it to be dynamic? Let me show you how it actually works in a real life. So what I have here, okay. Let me start with the dev command first. Okay. So I have it. I just need to, yeah, let me open it here. So this is basically what that framework produced. So this is kind of a, again, small example, kind of application that you create as a part of your learning process to familiarize yourself with the Next.js framework in the first place. So this is, let's say, my personal blog with a few pages, and I can go, for example, to this page. I can go back to home, and as you can see, everything works in more or less the same way as it used to be before. But it's actually not. Let me show you one super important thing here. Let me go to the network tab. And what I will do, I will empty the cache and hard refresh the whole website. It will take some time, but I did that on purpose because I want to show you that to get to this web page, it actually took certain requests. So the assumption will be that if I will go to the next page, it should be more or less the same certain requests, but it's actually not. So let me clear this one and let me go to this page. As you can see now, it's only 6 requests. And let's check actually what those requests are. Let's check the URLs first. Okay, it seems like I cannot expand that for some reason. Okay, nonetheless. So the idea here is that if you will check those URLs, you will actually be unable to find any HTML page there. So the question is like how it was actually possible that I went to that web page, but I didn't actually get any HTML in my console. And here, the Next.js framework, they're basically doing this trick, and I love that trick also by a lot, is that as soon as the application itself loads, they are switching to this new and fancy way of working when if you want to change your page, they will not go, like the full cycle download, the HTML download, all the kind of an assets, potentially the same assets and stuff like that. They will just call for this JSON file, and in this JSON file, in this JSON file, you will be able to see some metadata, but in addition to that, the HTML content of the page itself. So as you can see, content HTML, and here you have the HTML content of the page itself. So this is extremely awesome because for the end user, what it's actually meaning, it means that for the end user, it will work even faster because before we were actually, like reducing the server time for sending us the response, and now we are reducing both the server time and the client time, because on the client time we're not just like switching to the next page, but we're downloading only that minimal part which is required basically to make it work. And in addition to that, let me show you again. If I will clear that and empty the cache and hard refresh again, but now not on a home page but on this page, so here you have certain requests again, but if you will check, you don't have the SSG SSR JSON file. Now it was the HTML which was fully rendered on a server side. You may ask actually why I need to concern about that, and the reason for that is that if you want to also maintain a good scoring for your website in different search engine optimization optimization techniques, and if you want your website to be recognized by the Google and other search platforms, then you need to be concerned about that. Because in terms of Google, if you are not aware about that, the Google, it will basically grab the HTML page only. It will not execute any JavaScript. It will not do such kind of thing. So it will grab the HTML and it will analyze the HTML and it will score your website based on that HTML only. So if you will implement your website by creating kind of an Angular or React application with basically an empty HTML page, and then you download the React or Angular, and only then you're calling some API for the content, for the end user, it will be more or less no difference at all. But for the Google, that will be the huge difference. So that is why I do believe in Angular that was introduced since the version 5. In other frameworks, I am not sure about that, but nonetheless, in Angular version 5, what they introduced a thing that they called the server-side rendering. So here, basically, the guys implemented the same concept. So if you will basically get that page for the first time, so if you're opening this application with this URL, it will basically mean that the framework itself will need to render that HTML page on a server side, because the framework cannot, let's say the difference between the real user and the Google bot. So that is why the first page, it will always render on a server side, and after that, all the subsequent pages, so let me switch again back to the home page. Let me clear this guy, back to home. So now, as you can see, I have the index.json, and in my index.json, I basically have the HTML content of that page. Yep. So that is how it works. And the trick here is that if you okay, let me show you actually. Let me show you another thing before I will talk about that. The other thing that you can do, let me just close this guy. You can run the export command, which will be built following by the export. So npm run export. What it will do in this case, it will basically create an output folder, and it will export the website into that output folder. So the demo that I want to show you next is, again, I will open my Explorer, Storage Explorer, and I will select all those files, and I will delete them. And I just want to replace them basically with the content from that folder. Okay, so it was exported correctly. So I will reveal that guy in the Finder. I will open this one. So wait a second, I need to do this and this. And I need to select everything here and put it here. Okay, so now it's uploading. Let's go to the Microsoft Edge and let's open the Azure portal, which was here. Let's switch back to that storage account, because what I wanted to do there, I want to change one of the settings. Static website. So here, that's not an error. That's for now. That's because kind of a different conventions, but nonetheless. So let's check on our uploading. Okay, we're done with the uploading. So I will copy this URL again, and I will paste it here. And as you can see, the website is working. And I can go to this page, I can go back, I can go to this page, I can go back, and it seems like everything is working fine. The site was exported as a static app, and I can, with this solution, I can go directly to production. But technically, I cannot. And the reason for that is, let me go here, and let's say that I created a new article basically on my blog, and let's say that I want to share the link for that article with an audience. So for new users, they will try to access this URL first. So when I will try to refresh it, I will have 404 page not found. And the reason for that is that URL, it should be processed on a server side by the application. So in general, it seems like that's a good idea to use the export, but I still can't host that website in Azure, at least using this approach, because only the home page will work as expected. So each and every user will need to start a journey from the home page. But there is actually a solution on this one. So let me do the following. Let me open the IT Talk resource group, and let me create a new resource, which is called Static Web App. So currently, static web apps, they are in a preview, but nonetheless, I want to show it to you. So we'll use the same resource group. We will do something like IT Talk 2020 Demo 2. The region, we will use West Europe, and that was actually a first service which was created and integrated extremely tightly with the GitHub. So I cannot create my static web app without connecting it to the GitHub. So I need to sign into my GitHub account. Okay, authorize password. I need to also remember my password, which I probably don't. Oh, no, I do. Awesome. Okay, so now what I can do on my GitHub account, I can choose that I will use myself as an organization. So that will be my personal account for the repo, and I prepared that for the other conference, and I will reuse that one here. I will use this repo JS Talks 2020. The branch will be the master branch, and then I need to specify the build details. So what I will do here, I will use the custom template, and the only one thing that I need to specify in terms of my custom template, I need to specify where the output of my website will be, or like where the output of that framework will be. And as we remember, it will be in a folder called out. Okay, so I can do the review and create. I can create that. It will be created, and what it will actually create underneath, besides all the resources in Azure that are needed to host that website, it will also go to the GitHub and it will create a GitHub action. And by GitHub action, what I currently mean, I mean it will create a pipeline which then will be run automatically each and every time as I was configured, for example, when something will change in a master branch, and it will grab the new content and it will publish that content to this particular web app. So let's go to resource, and here is the URL of our web app. What I want to do first, if I'm not mistaken, I want to open the environments tab. Yeah, I want to open the environments tab, and the reason for that is that I just want this deployment to finish. But anyway, I do believe that I can still grab that URL and show to you how the empty website actually looks like. So this is the empty website, the default kind of a Microsoft, let's say, landing page for that kind of a services. Let's go and check what is happening here. So we're still waiting for the deployment. Unfortunately, I cannot speed that up. So we will need to wait a bit for this deployment to be done. But anyway, let's utilize that opportunity and let's check again. Do we have any questions in a chat?
Unfortunately, so far we don't. So
okay,
we can wait and move on. I hope that, guys, you will have some questions in the way anyway. So we're waiting. Don't be shy.
I just want to ask that tricky question. Do we have any other attendees beside you and me?
Yes, of course we have.
Okay, that's a bit of relief. But yeah, I mean, like what I'm actually doing here, so we are actually sitting here and waiting for the paint to dry. That's not really kind of, oh, okay, it's ready now. So let's go to this one and let's refresh. And as you can see, I refreshed that, and now I have this application, and now I can switch, as you can see, to other pages, and it works perfectly with the home page, but that's what we've seen before. Let me try to refresh that. And as you can see, I'm refreshing, but it's still working. So the idea is that there are a lot of things happen, especially in this area, because I'm not sure actually again about the exact set of attendees that are watching us right now, but here in Eastern Europe, the majority of the IT business, they are focusing on creating like web applications, and they are usually ignoring the websites. But recently, I basically joined a company which are specialized on the creating of different websites. And the thing is that among our clients, we have such brands like a L'Oreal, for example. So create a website for L'Oreal and then scale it globally, like so everyone will be able to access that website from all the different countries. And then you also want to optimize basically on the performance, and then you want to optimize on those performance metrics which are important to Google and stuff like that. That's really kind of a challenging task. That's totally different from creating an applications, and of course, we are not always using those kind of tools that I showed you today, but my idea was to show you that, and to show you that if you need to create a solution, then the first thing you need to start with is the exact requirements for that solution. Because as an engineer, I also experienced it myself, that if you have a hammer in your hand, then basically all the tasks to you, they look like nails. And this is the big problem. So if you're really kind of, like a big expert in the CMS, and currently I'm working with an enterprise-based CMS, which costs kind of a hell of a lot. So if you experience with that CMS, but if you need to create a simpler solution, or maybe the solution which has a totally different domain area, you may want to consider some alternative options. And one of those I was showing you today. So on that point, I'm not sure that I have actually any more content. So I see that as a perfect opportunity to show that slide, to share my contacts with you again. Yeah, on that point, I was actually expecting that we will have some questions and we can, like proceed and discuss those. Maybe I didn't answer, maybe I didn't explain something really good. So yeah, I mean, like guys and girls from the audience, that's a perfect opportunity to you to ask those questions.
So actually, Anton, there is only one comment that everything is explained in so much detail that there's nothing to ask. The comment from our audience.
Okay, so how I actually heard that, so I bored everyone to death.
No, I'm pretty sure that's not true. But I hope that anyway, we don't have questions now, but anyway, maybe someone will reach out, Anton, for more details. Let's hope. So thank you very much, Anton, for this amazing speech. We are very grateful that you have been with us, and I hope it was not the last time.
Yeah, thanks. And also, I want to share maybe another thing with you and with the audience. I probably should share that at the beginning, but nonetheless, so I'm also kind of excited to work with the DataArt. And one of the reasons for that is that I actually used to work in a DataArt. I used to work for 2 years in a Kyiv office, and I enjoyed that by a lot. But then I switched to the other opportunities, but nonetheless, so I can say that I'm an ex-DataArt employee, and as you can see, all of you were still maintaining the good connection and were still contributing to the community. So again, thanks for inviting me today.
Great, thank you very much, Anton, for these words. Okay, I would like to also say thank you to our audience. Just a request I have, please fill in the survey to grade our today's IT talk, and you will find all the details in the chat. We just posted it. And thank you once again, and have a great evening, guys.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.